but he had a slight hiccup health-wise, so he's in the hospital, but wants to watch us on Zoom, so I'm going to get him the Zoom link as soon as it comes through to my phone. Thank you for coming, and thanks for those watching on Zoom. First, let me just say, I really, this congregation has been really incredible to my family in the last couple of weeks. People know my mother passed away. We had wonderful services here, private family services, so thank you to the church for being so good to us in a tough time. Everything okay?
Just want to make sure we're unmuted.
We are on? Yeah, we're unmuted.
Okay.
And I'm not. So thank you so much to the Christchurch community for reaching out. And my dad, particularly, really appreciated it. Okay, I'm now sending this to my brother and my father, who are both about to take it. Okay. By the way, that may lead to tougher questions, so let's see. So it's great to be here, and I appreciate the chance to speak, and I've been honored to speak here in the past. And I want to start out by simply saying, before we get to what to do, and I'm eager to hear what other people think, I want to take a step back, and this is less of a problem now than it was a few months ago, to also say why to do. Because a few months ago, a lot of people kind of lost hope, and and I think this is still the case for some people. Things are so overwhelming, things feel so overwhelming, the bad news seems to keep coming, that sometimes people wonder, is it even worth it? Isn't everything lost? Why bother? And, given protests that I was, and Tom was there, out on the street on Saturday, and a town hall meeting I did the other day. I mean, it's clear that a lot of people are starting to see they do do things, and they are doing things. But I do think it's important to put what's happening now into a broader context, historical context, so people understand why it's frankly more important than ever that we do things right now. And then we can talk about what we do. And to talk about this, I want to sort of respond to a letter I got shortly after the election that woke me up as to just how alarmed, down, traumatized people were. I'm kind of a guy who gets up out of bed every day, pretty optimistic, so this did not capture me completely, but I think it was a real window into how a lot of people were feeling, and I think many still are. So this was a friend of mine who works literally, she's a professor in the space of international affairs and democracy and authoritarianism. And a few days I've co-taught her class with her a few times. So this is someone who, this is her profession, studying, learning, thinking through this stuff. And she wrote me a few days after the election, "Dear David," or "Hi David, I am in a state of deep sadness, but more than that, fear. I think the Trump guys are totalitarians, even madmen. I have never felt anything like this before. It's like the end of the world as we have known it." She goes on in things I won't repeat, but with the addition of the tech billionaires to the coalition, everything is different and worse. I'm shocked that she wrote, "Dems seem to be all about moving on, but I don't see the future. I'm terrified. I think they want us to die." Elon Musk is showing contempt for any notion of separation of powers. And then she closed by saying, "Tell me, are you frightened? I'm trying to find a reason to feel safe or protected, but this feels more like a war than an election. All my best to you, and thanks for everything you tried to do." And that's a heavy email from someone who, again, isn't just paying attention after the election, but really thinks through this stuff nationally, internationally, teaches it. And so, like I'm sure most of you, I got the email and I want to be polite, so I wrote back right away, but I also said, give me a few days. You've asked me very serious questions. You've asked me to look deeply into my own thoughts about it. So give me a few days, and over the next week, I, on several airplane rides and other ways, put together my answer, because what her email was, I think her email was capturing how millions of people were feeling. And again, still are. And to some degree, I think, even though I would be hesitant to admit it, like how I was feeling. So I thought, well, let me really think through my answer. And I wrote her a quite lengthy response. I will not read it all, but I want to kind of summarize what I said to her. The first thing I said was, let me make sure I don't know the answer to the questionnaire, but I think there'll be a way to get a recording, yeah. I said, I'm too fearful of everything you described. About Trump, all the promises he's made, which they'll move quickly to implement. And I said, I didn't dismiss her concerns. And I said, the entire plan will pay a price for what he's going to do. And then I said, that history instructs us, and I really believe this, that it only places us more at risk if we deny to ourselves that the worst of what can happen. And that's very clear. So I think sometimes the instinct, a moment of emails like that, is to say, oh, don't worry about it. You're overthinking it. It's not going to be that bad. And I didn't say that because I think if you look back, those are the answers that led to the worst. Don't respond, don't take it seriously. They would never do that. And frankly, a lot of what she warned was going to happen is happening. But then I said, despite the fact that I agree with you that all those risks are there and we should take them all seriously and we should think through the worst case scenario seriously, I then wrote that my mood wasn't really frightened of it, because that was what she asked. I said, my mood is resolute. And I walked through the reasons that I thought that, and I want to walk through those with you today, and why I think all of us need to do what we saw the other day at that rally, and need to keep pushing back and feel resolute about doing so. A couple of things I talked about with her were, first, the history of this country is very clear, and it's something that I think we've been blinded to since the Voting Rights Act, where we just assume democracy is here to stay no matter what. The history of this country is not that. The history of this country is a non-stop back and forth between a more inclusive democracy and a battle over who should be included. And whenever that democracy has become more full and more fully represented, there has always been a backlash. That's our history. Sometimes when you look at people who are out trying to censor history, often, almost, not coincidentally, the aspects that are on the chopping block to be censored are always the periods of backlash. But if you peel away those attempts to censor, what you see going back, abolitionism, Civil War, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, Voting Rights Act, Southern Strategy, Obama, it's a back and forth. It always has. And we are now in a moment that's very consistent with centuries of history of a backlash following a moment of a more fully represented democracy. And that doesn't make me feel better or worse, and that doesn't make me resolute, but that's where we need to see ourselves. That's the position we're in. The reason it makes me resolute, though, is to know that in the past, at these moments, Americans in far worse positions than we have been in have overcome it. They've done more with less to get us to where we got with the Voting Rights Act, or I would say, the moment where our broad democracy became so clear with Obama winning, partly in the persona of Obama, but partly in the Obama coalition coming together the way it did. That generations before us, abolitionists, suffragists, civil rights leaders, facing far worse than we even still face today, overcame it to improve it. And that does give me hope that there is a path, and that the result of people coming together and fighting back has been success when they've done it. In a way, I think that, I don't want to get carried away, but and Tom, you heard me say this the other day, in a way, I hope it inspires us. Because I believe that our lives have, frankly, more meaning because of the moment we're in than I think we probably ever assumed. In the past, someone like me as a party person or a candidate, you're kind of fighting over the next election, and the stakes seem big, but they really weren't that big. We're now in a moment where we are very similar, although again, I think our situation's a little easier than the greatest heroes of our history, who at moments of backlash fought back. I mean, that's what the protesters from the other day were doing. That's what the town hall in Butler County, we are all playing a role that is a very historic role. And it's very important that we play that role, if you look at our history. And in the past, we've seen that people playing that role have overcome worse than we have, with more risk they took on. I mean, when John Lewis showed up to the Freedom Rides before Selma, he and those young people were taking on a world dead set against them, and they had no idea if they'd live through it. And then, of course, Selma, he knew what was going to happen on that bridge. I mean, they overcame more, they faced more, just like people registering with folks to vote in the 60s. I mean, all of it, and they overcame it. So that's the hope that if they did it, we can do it. But there are also some really important reasons to do this now, and to not wait for too long and see where things fall, or to think that we'll see how bad it gets before we do anything. The history is also very clear that depending on what we can determine how long the backslide lasts. There are times where the backsliding against a fully representative democracy have lasted a very short time. And there are times where that backslide lasted nearly a century. And the determinant of that backslide and how long it lasts is usually not about the wiliness and the corruptness of the side fighting democracy. It's the relentlessness and persistence of those fighting for democracy. They determine it. If you look at how we got Jim Crow, I've been doing a lot of reading on our Ohio Ulysses Grant. They fought for some time back and forth, as they were trying to, as white supremacist forces were trying to tear apart Reconstruction. And it went back and forth. And when people fought hard, they got the 14th, 15th Amendment. Ulysses Grant sent the troops down to stop the KKK. And then they quit. And it was the quitting that led to nearly a century of Jim Crow. So what we have on our shoulders, knowing that people have successfully fought in the past, and it can make a difference, is also the urgency of doing it. Because I believe if we do it effectively, early, and forcefully, and we rally, what we're dealing with now, the darkness in that letter, can last a couple years. And then we can change it. But if somehow we don't do it with energy, passion, or effectiveness, that same moment can last and roll out for decades. That's the clear precedent. And so we have a chance by rallying early to minimize the damage. And that keeps me going, if those of you watch me every single day, knowing there's an urgency. Because I don't want my 10 and 8-year-old to be living with all this till they're 50. I want this to be a memory that they are thinking, oh yeah, until I was about 12 or 14, things were crazy, and then things got pretty normal. And what we do now, not only for our lifetimes, will determine if the next generation has that very long memory, or no memory of a better time, or if this is just a momentary issue. That's on us right now. And history tells us that how much we do now determines if it's 2 or 4 years, or 30 or 40. And there's another reason for that that I think is really important to talk about for 1 second. And that is, by the way, this is all what I wrote in late November. But I was laying all this out. One reason, and this is one thing that really scares me. One major reason why we can either have it be 2 or 4 years, or 40 or 50, is what I think of as sort of our collective memory problem as a country. We very quickly forget how things were just a few years ago. And that, not only because individuals forget, but generations move on. People who knew the world one way, 10 years later, the next generation knows it a different way. And I've written about this a few times. I'm haunted, for example, by the teenager a young black teenager, maybe 15, who grew up in, let's say, the 1870s in a southern state, who everyone he knew voted. Because blacks were voting in huge numbers and registering in huge numbers in the South when he was 15 or 16. And all throughout his community, he would have had elected officials who looked like him. Not women, but men. Mayors and state reps, state majority leaders of those state houses were African American. There was a member of Congress every year from the South, at least one, a black member of Congress, for 40 years. So at that age, that young man would have literally thought, wow, this democracy is moving in the right direction, and I feel somewhat, it would have been a terrible time in many ways, but there was representation. 30 years later, someone in the same position, there would be a single, he would know almost no one who was even registered to vote. There wouldn't be a single black elected official anywhere in that state. And that young 15-year-old from the 1870s would not start to see progress when he became older until he probably turned 80 and Jackie Robinson entered baseball. But the scary thing for me is that the young person 20 years later has no recollection of that. So the only world that second generation person would know would be the world that no one he knew voted. There was no diverse representation. And my fear is that second round, the collective memory that it used to be different is gone. And so even challenging the new status quo is next to impossible, because when you start to say, well, I want a world where black voters are registered and they're in office, people would then look at it, what are you talking about? That's not the world we live in. And my worry right now is the same thing can happen, that the memory of all of us have of how it's supposed to work is rapidly changing. And so young people, right now, my kids' age or teenagers or the ones who just started voting, that very quickly they are deciding what politics is, what public service is, what public officials do. Do they think that it's normal for billionaires to run everything or not? We don't think it is, because that's a brand new development. But pretty quickly, in a couple years, the complete abnormality, I mean, that's a nice word for it, brokenness of American politics with open racism and billionaires running the show and the coarseness of it, the corruption of it. If we're not careful, the current 20-year-olds will literally think, well, that's politics. So the good ones who we want in public service will never want to do it. And the people who are motivated by all the worst things will think, well, that's what you do. And we're already seeing that, by the way. You know, they're running for office because they think the model is amazing that Trump's doing. And so I think the one reason why time is not on our side, we have to move quickly, is before the new broken politics becomes the new normal, and generations don't even know to change it, we can't let that set in. We are sort of the generations, and it's not just us, it's a whole lot of them, who know what it can be at its best, who know what service is supposed to be. And we need to be fighting for that, not just the results in elections, but the very vision itself of what it's supposed to be before a whole generation just decides, and they kind of already are, by the way, that none of this is worth being involved in, and that politics is dark no matter what. So why bother? I had a young woman a few years ago, late in the Trump campaign, the first one, who I said, and this was I'm so glad she spoke up and corrected me. I said, maybe in October, something a lot of us would have said. I said that this was a group of interns who were at the party headquarters, and I was talking about politics. And at one point I said, the reason why so many of us are so worried about Trump is none of what he's doing is normal. This is not normal. And this 19-year-old African-American woman raised her hand and she said, Mr. Pepper, I disagree with you. For our lifetimes, this is completely normal. This is all we've ever seen. She didn't go through it, but I thought about it. What she was saying was, well, when I was, born around 9/11, when she maybe was 11 and she was African American, a president we were being told was not even from America because of the color of his skin. the divisiveness of the Trump campaign. And then, of course, that young woman in a month from there saw the person I was saying was Sarah Bomo win. So there's a whole generation that it's setting in that this is how it works. You know, this is going to make us all feel really old. I didn't say this to her, but as I thought about what she said, you know, when I grew up, I watched 3 political shows a week. They were all on Sunday morning. They were Tim Russert or his predecessor. It was Cokie and Sam. And it was whoever was on CBS, and it was normally a very calm, older gentleman. And it was very calm, and they would interview people in a calm way, and it was normally a Warren Rudman or a Tim Wirth or a John McCain. And politics felt really normal. Like, as a kid, I thought, oh, these people seem pretty good. And now it's like three stations. There wasn't even Fox News. Right? You all remember that? And now think about it. What do the young people see now? It's it's social media. There are more hosts. You can't keep up with who the hosts are on the TV shows, let alone who they're interviewing. So the whole world they're seeing is really, you know, spinning in that direction. And I think we have, in the next couple of years, and every year that goes by the way, not to get morbid, but they are replacing us numerically. So we don't have that much time to convince future generations of America, just like that young African American would have said, no, not that long ago, we all voted. 30 years later, when he said that, he would have sounded nuts. And we have that same moment right now, through not just the results, but through our actions, to really get back to it and make people see before it's lost that not very long ago, politics wasn't all this out of control. Good people wanted to be in office, and when they got there, they actually served the public good and not the private. And right now, a lot of people paying attention, that's just not what they're seeing. A couple other things, and I'll talk about what we can do and open it up. I said this end is happening. We have to be ready quickly because they will move fast. They always do, and that's what's happening. This is an all-hands-on-deck moment because for them, it's the more they can do very quickly, the more damage they can do, the more it sets in. One reason I say that is because I've studied state houses for years. When they have unaccountable control through gerrymandering, they move as fast as they can, they throw as many things out there as they can. So even if you focus on one, you can't stop the other 9. And that's clearly what's happening right now in the first 100 days. And I think we're right around the 100th day. People will need our help. But here's the opportunity. The opportunity is also there in everything I've described. And this is a little bit of the politician in me, but this is also playing out in the way I described. I wrote to this woman, they have no mandate and they will overreach. And that's clearly what is happening. In almost every way, including now on immigration, you already see with polling, Donald Trump and the forces that have empowered him are dramatically overreaching. There's almost no issue that they are talking about where the American people agree with them. And when I say they overreach, and this is a little bit of a political analysis for you, you can take it or leave it. One reason I think they overreached is because there was no mandate from last November's election to do any of this. Not only because it was a narrow election, because when you look back, there was a structure to the election that really kind of got overlooked, but as we look back, it's very clear. That election was, sure, it was about Donald Trump and running again, but if you look at it within the broader context of the world, that was an election of an unpopular incumbent amid inflation. Whatever he wasn't doing right, and people may have liked him or not, Joe Biden was an unpopular incumbent. He just was. Inflation was high, and all around the world, incumbents for the last 10 years have lost all of those races. It's almost been clockwork. And Kamala Harris was asked to jump into the breach and try and lift what was a very unpopular incumbency into success. I actually think she did to some degree. I think she did better than Joe Biden had done. But in the end, overcoming the basic structure of that race, unpopular incumbent amid inflation, was a bridge too far. In many ways, so in a different way of saying it, it was an election that was very hard for Donald Trump to actually lose. When you think about it. When you think about the structure of it and you look around the world as to what has happened to incumbents amid this, they've all lost. So the fact that Donald Trump barely sneaked out a win in swing states by the thinnest of margins is actually a very weak showing amid a election that was structured for that challenger to win. And so I was pointing out that, but we all have watched them for years. They don't underread their mandates; they overread them. And so I do think, in the near and longer term, there is opportunity. Frankly, I hate to say it, in the pain they're inflicting, they are waking up people to in how many ways they are far more extreme than people who maybe even voted for them. And you're already seeing that. The Wisconsin Supreme Court race just a few weeks ago, polling on every issue. And the thing that one other thing they did in overplaying their mandate is Donald Trump. Actually, one of his skills a few years ago was that although he sort of is a billionaire, and it kind of goes up and down about how much that really is. My worry is a lot more now because of this cryptocurrency corruption he's doing. But he probably is more wealthy than he's ever been because of that. But he's always convinced people that he was the everyman's billionaire. And I actually think he succeeded in doing that in the first term. Hey, I may be wealthy, but I'm going to use my success to help you. And I think people rallied around that brand that he created. He actually, I would give him credit. He was effective in creating that sense. He's my billionaire. He's going to go for bat for me. He doesn't care, and he's successful, and he'll use his success for me. And he did that pretty well. But then he made, this is part of overplaying the mandate, but then he made a huge mistake. On Inauguration Day, he had a bunch of real billionaires sitting in the front row. And then he puts Elon Musk in charge of everything, the biggest billionaire in the world. And it turns out that except for him, most billionaires, people don't think they're going to bat for them. They think they're going to bat for themselves. And by wrapping the first 100 days in billionaires, I think 9 cabinet members, Musk, deals with Bezos, all of it has been horrible politics. You look at any poll out there, and you ask people, do you think it's good that Donald Trump is being guided by billionaires or has 9 in his cabinet? Most people of bipartisan say, no, that's a terrible idea. So I think even in the way, let alone the policies of attacking Social Security and Medicaid and all this other stuff, wrapping himself with other billionaires who have not successfully created that brand was a real mistake. And if you look at the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, the minute Elon Musk threw $26 million into that race, which was close, the Wisconsin Democratic Party literally made the entire race about Elon Musk is trying to buy the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And the candidate they were supporting won going away, partly because of it. So I think the billionaire wrapping is a massive misreading of the electorate and a real problem in terms of their mandate. And so I'll just close by saying one of my big pushes is, and this is a mistake that both parties have made over the years, Democrats more recently, while there are issues that are, I think, potential issues that they've overreached on, and this is a long conversation we've had at prior sessions, the idea that the way we run at moments where we want to come back is we simply focus on the presidency and a few federal races is not a good long-term strategy. Of course you want to win those. But the way in the history of when parties in the wilderness have come back, it's always been the same strategy. Karl Rove did it. You may not remember. After Obama won in 2008, there was a cover of Time magazine. It was an elephant, and it said, extinction. People believed that when Obama won, it was the end of the Republican Party. Just like after Bush won the re-election, people thought Democrats were in big trouble. On both occasions, the path back was not simply, let's go find a great presidential candidate or recruit 20 congressional members for federal seats. It was going from the state houses up. It was figuring out that democracy of this country is shaped at states, in state level politics. That's where the gerrymandering happens. That's where most of the voter suppression happens. Most of the bills that are turning America upside down are largely not coming through Congress, where almost nothing ever happens or ever passes, or is filibustered even past the House. Most of the attacks on higher ed, on schools, on reproductive, whatever it is, almost all of it is state house level. And so if the response to this opportunity is, oh, we're all, and someone wrote this yesterday, if all we're doing is seeing big rallies and saying to ourselves, or seeing moments of bravery like Chris Van Hollen or Chris Murphy, and all we do is say, wonderful, let's run for president in 3 years, that's not a winning strategy. You have to take the energy and apply it from the grassroots up. Run in more places. Get yourself messaging in more places. Get better people running in more places. Who did that? Karl Rove did that. He wrote, a year after that extinction headline, he wrote, it's amazing how clear he was about what he was doing. By the way, I was running for state office at the time. I didn't see it coming, even though, again, it was written in a story in the Wall Street Journal that he wrote. He said, how are we going to win back the country? He said, through Portsmouth, Ohio. And he named multiple other local communities where they were running state house candidates. And that's exactly what they did. And you remember the 2010 election, they flipped state houses across the country. Democrats, like they still done today until very recently, didn't run in half those places. And their comeback came because they took the energy and the frustration and they brought it not just to the next presidential 3 years down the road, but they went ground up, state level, Board of Education even, because that's a new fight for democracy. And that's how they did it. And I think if we see an opportunity, which I think there's going to be from their overreach, it's not just to protest and to channel that protest to do. Again, you'll see it every time someone does something brave. Well, he should now be on the short list for president, or she. Like, that's fine. Let's get to that later. But in the near term, it's who in that crowd may be a great candidate to run in a year and a half, or locally, and start running in more places. And again, that's what Howard Dean did with the 50-state strategy, and that worked. That led to 06 and 08, and that's what Karl Rove did. And that's our opportunity. And I do think in the end, if you do that right, and this is the final point I made in that email, if you do that right, the timing also works, because we are in the second term of a Republican president. And whether you're in the second term of a Democratic president or Republican, that's normally when the other side does very well. So they're overreaching, people are concerned, people are starting to rally, but we have to channel that energy into a ground-up effort that's much broader than just who's going to be the next president. But if we do that right, I think the timing of second-term presidencies means that midterm, in a year and a half, actually beginning with races this year in Virginia and other states, we saw it in Wisconsin, is a huge opportunity to make this not last 40 or 50 years, but to turn it back a year from November and then go from there. I'll stop there and open up to questions. I'd love to talk about some of the short and near and long-term things we have to do, but I'm happy to do that through Q&A. Thanks, everybody. Yeah.
It can't be done on a partisan basis, I don't think. I came from a meeting that Common Cause held this morning about the major voter suppression bill that the Ohio legislature is probably going to pass, making it much more difficult for people to cure their ballots, creating many more provisional ballots, making it harder, worse than the SAVE Act,
right,
being considered in the legislature right now. So it seems to me there has to be some way to mobilize the disgust and the integrity of people across parties. And it can't just be one party winning and that kind of seesaw. So how do you think we can do that?
I think I appreciate and cheer whenever I see Republicans standing up against these onslaughts of democracy. What Liz Cheney's done. This is strange for some folks, but I got in trouble for this, but I'm proud to have done it. Like Phil Hyman's been pretty amazing on issues of democracy, even though he was my opponent a number of years ago. Where very few of them, I think Phil Hyman would be an exception actually, where very few Republicans have ever been willing, including Mitch McConnell, who recently has also been a little braver at moments, on just raw voter suppression. It's been very hard to pull away any Republicans. It's been so central. I mean, Mitch McConnell, the thing, even though he didn't vote for Hegseth and other things, he was the one hell-bent on keeping a new Voting Rights Act from happening. And so your question is hard because that's the one thing between gerrymandering and voter suppression that even the pre-Trump Republicans do. and have not been able to pull away from. I think, but the more, and that's one reason it's been successful for them. And sadly, the disinformation that comes out about voter fraud has worked. So the same day that the Wisconsin Supreme Court candidate on the Democrat side won, Wisconsin passed a new voter ID law because they've been very successful in convincing people. And by the way, this is right out of the Jim Crow playbook. Most of the suppression from the 1880s, all those new rules and poll taxes and constitutions, were literally because they said, oh, the new African American voters, they're voting fraudulently. It was the same thing, same myth. So I think it's clearly become very hard to stop these at the State House. I think the more voices you can get that aren't just the Democratic Party, the better. But in some areas where we've been able to find success, like the democracy special election last August that did have bipartisan support, it's very hard to seem to peel away any Republicans on that. So I agree with you. The less partisan, the better. The more organizations that aren't partisan, the better. But man, when they call the roll on these votes about suppression, I mean, the state reps or the members of Congress, I mean, I think every one of them voted for the SAVE Act, as bad as it is in Congress. And I don't think there was any sense that anyone was going to stray. I hope the filibuster stops in the Senate. At the state level, I'd say make as much noise as possible, but know that
the bill in the state is worse.
Yeah. And we've had other bills. I mean, and then there's hope. Then one of the good things, one of the hopes is that you do get yourself into a federal court. There have been equivalents of the SAVE Act that passed in other states. They were so. Does everyone know the SAVE Act? From against this? The SAVE Act doesn't just disproportionately impact married women, African Americans, other voters of color, poor voters, because they don't have the IDs now required. This is the part of the SAVE Act that's being overlooked. It just destroys the current system of voter registration. Because in order to provide an identification to show you're a citizen, you can no longer register online or mail in. Only 5% of Americans go to their Board of Elections to register in person.